Morning, everyone. Week 3 game day. Here with Josh. How's it going today?
Going great, Chris. How are you?
Oh, doing good. This is a pretty amazing Sunday. I mean, we don't just got NFL. Get a little off topic here to start. We got Tiger Woods in the lead at the Tour Championship, so
He's back.
pretty excited with that. I got some background noise I'll get rid of. There we go.
El Tigre.
Yeah. So other than that, I mean, there's a ton to talk about with Week 3 this week. So we decided to do a live show here Sunday morning, nice and early. Talk about some inactives, go maybe position by position, talk about some of our favorite plays. So Josh, I'll let you go first, and some of your key inactives today that you're paying attention to.
Well, good morning, everybody. Just to catch everyone up, obviously it's the week kind of started out with the pricing looking very tough on DraftKings. They're catching up. They really seem to nail it this week. In particular, there wasn't much value, but then Jay Ajayi and Darren Sproles went down, so that started to open up Corey Clement. Then Dalvin Cook went down, that started to open up Latavius Murray. A lot of these guys. We'll get into this in a little bit about how just because there's an injury, it doesn't necessarily mean you just smash in the guy who's going to step in their shoes. But in those two guys in particular, Latavius Murray, we'll start with him. He's stepping in for Dalvin Cook today. He's been someone you've probably been hearing about all week. He should be a workhorse today. No Jerick McKinnon there anymore, obviously. Dalvin's down, so I don't even know who else they have that's gonna take. I'm sure they have some, some fourth round rookie or something who get a couple carries. But this is about a 17 point spread. So that doesn't happen at all ever in the NFL. Like, that's crazy. That's crazy talk. So
prime Patriots over the Bills or something.
Yeah, and Josh Allen's gonna get sacked all day. 17 point spread. It looks like LaShawn McCoy may not even play now too. So this is just the ultimate smash spot for paying up for defense and pairing it with the running back. Stick Murray in there with the Minnesota D. A lot of potential for defensive scores, as there's going to be a ton of pressure on the quarterback. He's going to be down 2+ scores all game. So I expect the Vikings D line to be pinning their what's the phrase, like pinning their tails behind their ears or whatever.
Pinning their ears back.
Yeah, you're pinning their ears back, just like running crazy at the quarterback. So obviously a great spot. I'm not telling anybody. I'm not telling anybody anything they don't already know. Excuse me. There you go. So that's the first injury smash of the day. Obviously a little bit more recent here. Leonard Fournette not playing. I think that's smart. The Jaguars had a much tougher game last week and took care of the Patriots at home, so I'm sure they won't have too difficult of a time with the Titans. Sands, what do you say? Marcus Mariota, whenever they don't have the guy. So Blaine Gabbert, he's not the worst backup in the league, but sorry, my dog's like squeaking his toy very loudly. But he's still a backup, and it's the Jaguars defense at home. So this injury probably means the most for TJ Yeldon. Some people may be off of him because he burned them a little bit last week against the Patriots, but I think that was kind of more of a game flow, like game script situation. And obviously when Fournette's out, Bortles' numbers are insane. They go way, way up. And people like Keelan Cole get a nice big boost too, but I like TJ Yeldon, not as much as I like some of the other guys out there today. We'll get into that. I'm sure you have some takes. As running back is a lot of value today. It's nice that it opened up that way. But just early, the most recent injury, Fournette, a little bit of bump for Yeldon. I think it's a bigger bump for GPP for Bortles and Keelan Cole. What do you got, Chris?
Yeah, my hot take on that a little bit is I'm going to be looking at some Corey Grant too. I mean, Yeldon's already been announced that he's not going to be like 100%, so he's dealing with some injuries himself. So I think Corey Grant's going to get some run this week. And last week with Fournette out, he ran, I believe there was something like 10 carries and he had like 5 targets. So he was out there in the field quite a bit as well. So definitely going to be looking at some. I
think he had like less snaps than Yeldon, like something very. Yeah.
And if Yeldon's not 100%, and everyone's going to be, flocking to Yeldon because of the Fournette news again, I really do like for GPPs throwing some Corey Grant in there at a cheap price. So definitely looking at that. I think Latavius Murray on that injury news, I think it makes sense. I mean, 17-point favorites. You can see the Vikings, pairing him with It's going to be very high owned, but like the Viking defense and Murray together. But last year when Cook went down, even sharing time with Jerick McKinnon there in the backfield, Latavius Murray was very productive. He's getting the goal line. He's
very
not
good within like the 5-yard line, you know.
He got the touchdowns there. I think he got 5 touchdowns in 6 games or something like that when he started. He's not going to, break off the 60-yard runs or anything. But I mean, if he's going to get like last week, there was one running back, Joe Mixon, who got 20 carries of the whole NFL week 2. I think Murray's maybe in line to be one of those 20 carry backs this week. And if that's going to happen, 4 yards per carry somewhere in there, that's going to be 80 yards. And, his probability of a touchdown in a game like that with that game script, I think he makes a ton of sense whether he's chalk or not. I mean, the price is there. So definitely going to be going with him.
Totally. I agree with you. And in my opinion, like 4 of the main running backs that are in like a lot of conversations this week, especially because of value, that I think are very different and similar at the same time are kind of Tevin Coleman, TJ Yeldon, Latavius Murray, and Corey Clement. You have like the Yeldon and Clement, like third down, pass catching backs that they're going to get a couple handoffs and they're going to, take draws and things like that, but they're not going to ever have 20 carries a game. And then you have like the Murrays and the Tevin Colemans who, obviously not all the time, but because of injury, are in situations to really be goal line backs, catch a couple passes. Really don't have much.
Bell cow types.
Yeah, and then more importantly, though, the game script should really favor both those guys. Murray, 17-point favorites. They'll be grinding the clock down eventually, as well as just giving it to him. Obviously, I expect Thielen and Diggs and all that to have great days. I mean, there's no, Buffalo's gave up like 40 points to Flacco. So, Minnesota's better than that. And I expect them to have a great day. But I think a lot of people out there are a little concerned that Minnesota's going to take their foot off the gas, and something like that would favor Latavius for sure. I feel similarly to Coleman. I don't think that game will be a blowout, and I think New Orleans may even win. But just such a high scoring, affair with I don't really see Ito Smith as a threat to Coleman's volume. So people like Tevin and Latavius are almost like, I prefer them even with without the savings to Clement and Yeldon, even on DraftKings with PPR.
Yeah, and looking back at last week, the Ito Smith there, he was only out in the field for 30% of the offensive snaps, and I don't think he's a real threat at all unless that game. Smith. Yeah, unless that game gets out of hand. I feel that's going to be a close game either way. Probably, I don't think it's going to hit the over. That's something I'm kind of looking at the trend of the under. So I'm in cash games at least avoiding some of that game a little bit. I think those defenses are a little bit better than, say like a 27-24 type game, something like that. So not looking a whole bunch at that game, but I definitely agree there. So I guess while we're talking running backs, let's just jump into the running back position. Top, I guess, cash game running backs first. Todd Gurley is expensive, but just his usage rate is huge. I mean, he's got 39 carries so far this year. He's only averaging 3.8 yards per carry, but that's only a 2-week sample size. So, that's going to even out, but he gets all the goal line. He gets a ton of targets. Just his usage, I think it's worth paying up for him if you can, depending on who you're going at quarterback. And then myself, I'm really looking at that mid-range this week. I really like Jordan Howard. In Chicago going up against Arizona. Arizona's allowed the most fantasy points to running backs through 2 weeks so far. And they just have no offense at all. So, the game script there for the Bears should lead Howard to getting up into that 15 to 20 carries this week. And I do like that. Usually you don't see a whole bunch of Tariq Cohen unless they get down. They need to, they're throwing a lot to the running back. And I just don't see that happening this week. So it kind of fits for Jordan Howard. And I like his price, $6,500 on DraftKings, $74 on FanDuel. And then the guy I'm really looking at is Chris Thompson. Adrian Peterson's 32. As you can see, he's up here in the background. He's just not the way he was back when I bought that jersey. I just don't see him consistently doing what he did in week 1, and that showed last week. But the one guy that has been consistent, especially for Alex Smith, who isn't a guy who's going to get the ball down the field a ton, is Chris Thompson. He's getting a ton of targets.
I view him as their number one receiver too. You know what I mean? So you got that bonus with him.
Yeah, exactly. Even with a healthy Jordan Reed, it takes some away there, but he really likes going to Thompson, and Crowder hasn't really done much so far. I think that's going to come around. They were really working well together, Smith and Crowder, in the preseason training camp and stuff like that. You hear from reports, but it just hasn't happened yet. And for mid 6K price tag on both sides, Chris Thompson makes a lot of sense. I like him a little bit better on DraftKings because of those catches in the full PPR format, but he's definitely someone I'm looking at. Going up in that kind of 6K and up range, who's your top cash running backs this week?
I think I agree completely with you. The Gurley is just the guy. He's the highest scorer of the week, running back wise, regardless, not taking price into account. His red zone usage in particular is just like, it's a fantasy player's dream. And this is the battle for LA. It's a big game today. I do think the Rams win. I was kind of surprised at this over under. I thought it was going to be at least like low 50s when I saw it. And I think it was like 46, 47. So, most people will definitely be putting a lot of their will be a little overweight on the Chiefs game or in the early stages, rightfully so. But I was definitely would not be shocked to have a Rams stack late in the day, see be the highest scoring of the day. That being said, Gurley, highest scoring running back for sure, 9,200. I do like Alvin Kamara a lot too as well, just in terms of arguing about who will be the best high scoring guy, simply because McCaffrey went ham against Atlanta last week, and it's going to be the same type of thing. As we know by now, Atlanta funnels their opposition's offense through, like they bait you into dumping it off basically, and they want you to do that. And it's New Orleans happens to be very good at that, and Alvin Kamara is very tough to bring down. So it plays right into the type of game plan that I would expect New Orleans to have. I believe Keanu Neal and the line Deion Sims are still out, right? For the
Yes.
So I mean, Atlanta's defense is not even close.
Jones,
to 100%.
linebacker Jones.
Sorry, yeah, at 100%. So I like Kamara a lot. But that's just it's so hard to pay that price this week. So, but honestly, my favorite cash, I guess he's not really cash play. He's cash for me, but he won't be cash for other people. 6K and up running back is Kareem Hunt. I think a lot of people are going to be off him this week because of his lack. He's getting he hasn't gotten nearly as many touches per game so far as he's gotten in the past or last season. I think big part of that has been game script and just the first game they're on the road in San Diego. That's not really a type of place where you expect to control the clock and just run, pound it to your running back. So, they won that game. They kind of stole it. It was before the world really knew about Patrick Mahomes. So, it's pass. That's not really, it's quick scores. Tyreek Hill ran one in from punt. It was an interesting game. Last week, another situation of game. Who'd they play last week? I'm blanking. Pittsburgh, right? Yeah. So that was just another crazy, high scoring game on the road. It's tough to, you don't really envision Kareem Hunt 20, 25 carries, but this week at home, last year at least, San Francisco was a great team to target against the run. The jury's still out on that. They've started well this year, but I'm not fully sold. That's another San Francisco. They're almost like a team that I feel like matches their opposition's vibe each week in terms of how they want to play. Last week they were at home. They could kind of set the tone, set the tempo, and just they got a quick lead on Detroit, and then they just they ran the ball a lot. They dumped it off to a lot of different receivers. It was it wasn't really a shootout. Today, Kansas City's going to control the pace and the tempo. They had 31 implied points at home for the Chiefs. So game totals 56, 57 or something like that, which has not happened many times in the past couple of years. You don't see that very often. So obviously this is a game that a lot of people are going to be on around the fantasy community. It's not I see something or we see something that no one does. But I do think a lot of people are going to just jam in Tyreek Hill and Mahomes and Kelsey and make that their automatic stack. Whereas for me, especially in tournaments with larger fields, I don't want to completely fade this game, of course, but I also don't want to just do what everyone else is going to do. So for me, that means stacking something like Mahomes, Kareem Hunt, who I expect to, them to have a pretty good lead in this game or eventually have the lead and get, a very good deal of usage. I think the opposing defense is going to be paying a lot of attention to Tyreek Hill and Kelsey, which kind of means that they have to have some people backed off the line of scrimmage, which is a great recipe for Kareem Hunt, who was the NFL's rushing leader last year and who breaks tackles with regularity. If he can get going and pick up some speed and get off the line and, have a couple yards of space before anyone even touches him, it's only a matter of time before he breaks one. He's 6K. And this is at least a 7,500 player, I think, when when they're at home and in a good matchup like this. So I'll be all over Kareem Hunt. And like I said, in my tournaments, I like stacking Mahomes, Hunt, and like Sammy Watkins. I think it's a nice little way to let me put it like this. If Kansas City does what I expect them to do, they win and all that, but it's not quite chalky. It's not going to be like San Francisco, played D and like shut them down. It's going to be because people like Watkins and Hunt have much better games than, are anticipated right now.
Yeah, and they're a good team where you like Kansas City's a good team where you can fade the Mahomes and stuff like that, and go with the other players on their teams that got so many weapons.
I like Mahomes. I feel like he's gonna spread it around. He's so fast. He can run it in too. Like every now, you never know. Like, this guy's his arm is insane. It's like watching a video game. I like him. I'm definitely intrigued by him, and this over under too high for me not to have major equity in. So sorry to take the long answer there, but Kareem Hunt is my favorite. 6K running back. That's not like, Todd Gurley, Alvin Kamara, So I do like Christian McCaffrey a lot too. But 7,800, it's kind of a good price for him.
For sure.
So yeah, let's move on a little bit to I'm trying to think. There wasn't that many injuries today, or at least not yet. So we know Aaron Rodgers is playing. I really like your Alex Smith call. I'm kind of surprised. Let me ask you, why weren't you on the Vikings last week? Or were you?
I was a little bit. I'm really inclined this week. I know I was all over Alex Smith for cash. He let me down. But I started looking at the numbers, and what I seen was he had 292 yards. He was up there. I'm just going to look at his total attempts last week.
Alex?
Yeah, Alex Smith first. I just wanted to jump in. You mentioned him there. He's 33 for 46.
We were only targeting him because he's playing the Packers. Was I wrong?
No, that's not the only reason. I mean, he almost hit value he didn't throw a touchdown last week is the only reason he didn't hit value. He hits cash value on both sites last week. He had 46 attempts, 33 completions, 292 yards. I mean, he's over 70% completion, which is going to happen for him because he doesn't throw it down the field a lot. Yeah. But like I said, he's got Chris Thompson, he's got Jordan Reed, and then this week he's against the Packers, who have really been funneling a lot of yards so far this year. And I think it's going to be, a fairly high-scoring game. Even Aaron Rodgers is projected to play here, so I definitely like that. Washington's been good against the pass, but this is Aaron Rodgers. He did it against the Vikings. Good defense in week 2 last week there. So definitely looking towards that Alex Smith for cash. He's just cheap. I mean, his price went down on DraftKings, and he doesn't need a whole lot to hit value against the Packers. I think he can easily do that. And it helps me fit more expensive running backs, tight ends, and wide receivers in my lineup. So that's kind of the reason why I'm going Alex Smith. I had Vikings last week in GPP. Like, I ran a lot of Thielen. I like Thielen again this week for cash. Even in that high-scoring game, he gets a ton of targets. And I mean, if they're going to get out to a big lead like that, the passing game is going to have a lot to do with it before, Latavius Murray could take over. And if the Bills somehow keep the game within, 10 to 14 points, the Vikings aren't going to let off the gas, and Cousins loves throwing to Thielen. He's like the safety blanket there, kind of in the slot. He always gets those little bit better matchups than Diggs on the outside. I mean, I like Diggs upside, but not so much for cash at the same price. So that's definitely something I'm looking at Thielen for cash there as well.
Yeah, Thielen's definitely the cashier of the two for sure.
Kind of all over the place.
Like a higher floor, I think, Pretty similar ceiling, but a higher floor.
One guy I like that you didn't mention in the running backs, a little bit cheaper on both sides, is Kenyon Drake. A lot of people, kind of shying away, I think, because Frank Gore is there. But looking at the numbers over
touches, but I definitely agree he's a good GPP play.
And it's like 65-35. Like, so far, Drake's on the field for 67% of the snaps, while Gore's only out there for like 35. So Drake's out there more on the offensive plays, and then the touch share is like 63% to 30%. So definitely love that. I mean, Drake's got way more upside. I'm not really worried about Gore whatsoever, and this is like a really good matchup. Miami's defense has played well, so I think they should have the game script in their favor. And Oakland, it just gives up a ton of rushing yards. I think they're the second most rushing yards so far this season, and like 25th in fantasy points against. So really like him. I haven't gone there in cash yet. I haven't, building my cash lineups. I got a lot of Howard, Thompson, even Ezekiel Elliott with Cowboys defense on the main slate there, that correlation. So I haven't gone to Drake a whole bunch in cash yet, but I'll have a lot in GPP for sure, because I just don't think a lot of people are going to be going that way. And just looking, I use Fanshare Sports, just kind of analyze. It's a great site. They kind of take in all of the information on Twitter, videos, podcasts, blah, 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 put it all into like a tag count. And then they have projections and stuff like that on there as well. He's just not getting mentioned a lot compared to other running backs. Like, of course, you got Latavius Murray, Gio Bernard, Kareem Hunt, Coleman, Chris Thompson, Jordan Howard, all these guys in that mid to lower range, Corey Clement, all those guys. I think he's going to be a little bit lower owned, like, 6 to 8% owned. And if I can get Kenyon Drake, who has 100-yard, 2-touchdown upside at 6 to 8% in GPPs, I'll take that all day.
No, I think it's a great point. He's not someone who I would go to right away, but like that's something that works in your favor in GPP. Like, it's just because there's people around him that are catching my eye first. But Drake was like one of the best backs in the league in the second half of the year last year. When they got rid of Ajayi, and Gore is like a placeholder. He's just like a solid like guarantee for like 2.5, 3 yards minimum. When they give him the ball, like. I'm sure it's just nice to, that helps them with their game plan. But yeah, Drake's clearly the guy. So 55 or 5,600 is a great price for him. You touched on Clement. We haven't really spoken about that Eagles game that much. I think it's a sneaky shootout potential. What about you?
Yeah, Indy's going into the season. You look at the Indy secondary; it's pretty weak. I mean, you got Carson Wentz back, so I'm really interested to see what's happening there. And that's maybe one reason why I'm staying away in cash. I think of Nick Foles. If he had a decent game, looked a little, not Nick Foles-ish last week. I don't think they would have maybe brought Carson Wentz back for maybe another game. So I'm interested to see where he's at with his health. But you look at their receiving options first of all. There's like no one. Mike Wallace is out right now. I think he's on season ending. Jeffrey's not back yet. He's practicing, but he's not back yet. He could be out for another week or two. So really, I'm looking at Zach Ertz and Nelson Aguilar to get another 10 plus targets each. I think they're both cash viable if you want to go there. And just kind of looking at the landscape of tight end, especially, you see Eric Ebron everywhere because Doyle's out. And even Marlon Mack's out for them at running back. So there's like Ebron's going to have huge ownership. And I mean, he's really cheap. So I see it. He only needs like 9-10 points in for cash games to get there. But if Hurts is getting another 10 to 15 targets, I'll definitely think about paying up for him as well. But Clement, I mean, he catches the ball while he's going to be in there. So if Wentz is even 80-90% of what he was last year when he was in MVP form, I think you're right. I think it could be a sneaky shootout. I mean, Andrew Luck, I think the Eagles defense hasn't really looked like it did last year so far. Whether they've made adjustments, obviously they practiced all week, they're going to make adjustments, but so it's really two quarterbacks that I'm just not completely sold on yet for different reasons. I mean, Luck's coming back, he's looked pretty good, but what's your thoughts there on those two quarterbacks?
Yeah, I think it's been encouraging to see T.Y. Hilton's been getting some more targets per game. Like last year he would get like 6 or 7, and you kind of only really targeted, or 2 years ago when Luck was healthy, you targeted him at home and stuff. But last couple of weeks, I think he's gotten like 8 to 10 targets a week. It's up a little bit. I think Ertz has been getting he's got like 20 something targets over the past 2 weeks. Also, that's only going to go up with his boy coming back. Wentz and him are very close. So yeah, Ebron, he's 3,400. You need like 4 catches for 40 yards at that price, and that's value right there. So I expect him to definitely do more than that. But Ertz, it's an interesting game stack. You could run it both. Depending on whatever side you take, having Ertz and Ebron at the flex tight end is a good strategy. I have that in a bunch of my Millie Maker lineups. Clement, I like him a lot. It makes sense. But, I'm kind of surprised more people aren't talking about the fact that if Philly gets up, let's say 10, 14 points in this game, and it's not quite as much of a shootout as other people think, Wendell Smallwood was kind of the guy who I would see who they would be handing the ball off to and killing the clock with. And, he can catch the ball too. So, Clement's definitely more dynamic and their guy, and he's ahead of him on the depth chart. And, I expect him to get more work. But, Clement also banged his knee up on Friday's practice. So, he's not coming into the game 100%. I think he's similar, if not worse, than TJ Yeldon injury-wise this week. And, you got the whole world. Clement's going to be like 40, 50% owned, very highly owned. There was talk he was going to be the most highly owned guy of the week before, Cook went down and some other guys went down. But, what are your thoughts on that? I think Wendell Smallwood's definitely sneaky, and I wouldn't be crazy surprised if Clement hurt a lot of people's weeks. The game flow doesn't really favor him, in my opinion.
Yeah, I could definitely see.
He's so cheap, so you can get away with it. But
looking just at the tag counts on Fanshare at the moment, he leads by like 15 tags overall. Over Kamara, Hunt, Bernard, Murray is the top 5 right now. So
everyone's just jamming him in.
GPP fade definitely in play for Clement. I mean, I like him in cash because he's so cheap. But that huge, 4 times upside that you're looking for to win a GPP, 4 to 5 times upside, I just don't see it in that game flow. I can see the floor is there, but the upside I just don't see, especially like you said, if the Eagles get out front. So
good, glad we agree on that. What are your thoughts on this Rams game? We kind of talked about it already. I think the one thing we didn't mention is Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods are very, very cheap on DraftKings in particular, 4,900 and 5,100. Robert Woods is like a 6K player, mid 6K player last year for most of the season for the second half when he was healthy. And I know Cooks is there too, and he's taking some of his targets and all that, but Woods is the guy, and I wouldn't be surprised to see. He just missed a couple touchdowns last week, at least one, by Goff overthrowing him by a couple inches. But I'm looking for Woods today, and Woods and Kupp are in a lot of my cash lineups where I'm not necessarily, maybe I have like Cam at QB, and I like to ride naked Cam a lot, without really just forcing one of his receivers in because he's not that good. So if I have a Cam lineup, and I like people like people like Kupp and Woods and John Brown, like around the mid 4,500, 5,500 wide receivers are where my bread and butter is this week.
Yeah, we're a little bit different on the Rams targets. I'm looking at Cooks. I think he's got a little bit better matchup.
He's so expensive. I mean, not so expensive, but he's 1,200, 1,300 more than the other guys.
And that's why I think he'll be a little bit lower owned. And his upside is just big. I mean, he's that home run play. I think he gets a little bit easier matchup. I've kind of seen Robert Woods seeing a lot of that Casey Hayward for the Chargers. So he's been rated out as a pretty darn good corner, probably the best on their team, without Jason Verrett out there. And I do love the Rams for GPP. A lot of people go to Gurley. I think you can play Gurley cash or GPP. I think he works both ways just because his usage is so good. But I love Jared Goff. I wrote him up in my value plays article. He's cheap. His price went down on DraftKings, and he's got that big upside as well. I mean, he only had 1 touchdown, I believe, last week, but he threw for 352 yards, I think, something like that, 354 yards and 1 touchdown, hit like 23 fantasy points on DraftKings, and his price went down $400 against these Rams who don't have a pass rush. Well, they have a pass rush. I shouldn't say that, but it's not as good. I mean, with Joey Bosa out, he's probably their best pass rusher. Teams can just stack. I talked about it week 1. They can just stack against double teaming Melvin Ingram on the other side. And then you got Jason Verrett out, who's their best corner. I think it's, their defense on the passing side of things just isn't going to be as good this year. So I love Goff, Cooks. I'll probably Kupp. I really like in the slot. Using him more in cash games, I'm finding, and then I got some Woods too. Not totally getting away from Woods, but I got a little more Cooks. Just I think he's going to be lower owned.
I think you're absolutely right. Cooks will be lower owned, and he's the home run guy. Like all he needs is to get free once, and then literally his price doesn't matter that he's more expensive. He's paid it off. You said it perfectly. Kupp for cash for me because he's like 4,900. He's getting 5, 6, 7 targets a game or whatever, guaranteed pretty much. So I like that volume. And Woods, I like Woods personally. I think you're absolutely right. He's the number 1 receiver, so he'll have the number 1 corner on him, which definitely hurts guys when they're not like in a shootout of a game necessarily, where they kind of need to get their value early or they may not get it at all. So yeah, I'm wary of him, but I also I'm a fan of his a lot. I like him at home, and I think him and Goff have good chemistry. And Goff had a couple weeks last year where the Goff Woods Gurley connection was like the stack of the week, and it was kind of in like quieter points. It usually happened when no one was talking about it. So look out for that this week. Is there anything else we haven't really mentioned here that you want to kind of discuss, or should
Yeah,
we
I
go?
wanted to ask you. I wrote him. I kind of in my recap article I wrote about him, and then I also wrote about him in my. I think he was either in cash or value plays. I forget. But Tyler Boyd.
Yeah,
I mean, AJ Green got the 3 touchdowns last week, but they split targets. They both had 9 targets last week. He scored as well, and he's really emerged. Everyone was kind of hoping Ross would get out there and he'd take over as a number 2, but he just hasn't been consistent. He's more your home run threat, but. Dalton's really liking Tyler Boyd as like a solid. He's been out there as a solid number 2 wide receiver, and he's still really, really cheap on both sites. So I think I'm myself in the lineups where I may be going mid-tier at running back, mid to upper mid-tier, and then some expensive wide receivers. I go 2 really expensive wide receivers. I think you can get Tyler Boyd in there, and you don't really need a whole lot from him. You know, he doesn't need that touchdown, but if he gets, say, 5 catches, 50 yards, gets in that 10 to 12 point range on DraftKings, I think, you know, he's going to hit cash value for sure. I don't like him as much for upside because AJ's got that upside for sure. But and I mean, it's Andy Dalton we're dealing with. But for a nice floor at his price, until his price starts coming up, I'm definitely going to be looking at him.
100%. No, I agree with everything you said. He's not going to go. I don't think he's going to get like 25, 30 points or have the upside. No. But I mean, you know, he's 3,700. You know, you don't need that at that price. I have him in season long. I like him a lot. Andy Dalton was talking his praises up during the week. So they're clearly getting along. Ross is really, really fast. So I think that plays on the safeties' minds when Tyler Boyd's out there. So that's helping him. What else? Targets are there. I mean, good matchup. Could be a high scoring game. I mean, I expect the game script to favor him. You know, they should probably be losing and have to throw the ball. Joe Mixon's out. Tyler Eifert played like a lot of snaps last week, so he's back in the equation. That helps in the sense of, you know, the defense can't just focus on Boyd and AJ. So yeah, I think everything you look for is there for him for sure.
Couple other wide receivers I'm looking at for GPPs I think are going to be a little bit lower owned, just where everyone is going. Is number 1, I'm looking at Randall Cobb now, knowing that Aaron Rodgers is going to be out there. I mean, he's dealing with his knee injury. But Devontae Adams is probably going to have the tougher matchup this week, just breaking things down. Even, you know, both outside guys, looking at Allison and Adams, are going to be facing Quentin Dunbar and Josh Norman on the outside, which is like horrible matchups for them altogether. And Randall Cobb in the slot probably going to be facing that, I think it's Fabian Morrow or something like that. He hasn't rated out very good at all, hasn't been that good. And Cobb's been actually surprising after his last year. So he's averaging like 8 targets per game so far through 2 games. He's got the yards there. And, I mean, he's only 5,200 on DraftKings, 61 on FanDuel. I think Rodgers is going to lean on him a lot as his safety blanket. So I like him both for cash and especially as a GPP pivot this week.
I like what you're saying. He burned people a lot last week, myself included. So that's going to help to his ownership being down too. To be honest with you, my initial reaction was to disagree with you, but I really like your logic. I think Cobb being in the slot makes a lot of sense. And if Washington's vulnerable anywhere, that's where they're vulnerable. So I like
the slot.
Yeah, my initial gut was Allison, but no, that makes a lot of sense. So I agree.
Yeah, they're tough on the outside. Mm-hmm. Dunbar and Norman are like elite corners in the league, top 10 for sure.
Washington's a sneaky good secondary.
Yeah, the least amount of passing yards per game so far. Pretty amazing. And the other guy that I'm looking at, he's probably going to be like 2% owned, I think, in that Atlanta-New Orleans game is Calvin Ridley. I think you can, at his price, I think you can pair him. If you think Atlanta, that game script is going to go, you could go Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, and Calvin Ridley. I think he's, as you get rookies coming in there, they're not going to do a whole bunch early, but as we've seen even with Anthony Miller in Chicago, they start coming on. You start seeing these guys' talents, and as long as they're low and their price is still down, I think this is the time to start jumping on those guys before they're in the 4 or 5K range, and you need a lot more from them. So 3,700 on DraftKings, I think he makes a good GPP, kind of like the Tyler Boyd thing, but I think Ridley's got more upside for sure.
Yeah, just while we're on, I agree with you. And while we're on this game, one thing I will say is that Alvin Kamara has had like 36 touches in his first 2 games. So, that's definitely not something that the Saints want to continue. It's a long season for them, and he's not the biggest guy. So $9,500. It's a lot of your salary. It's like almost a fifth of your salary right there. So, football, very crazy sport, a lot of injuries, and so I prefer Gurley over Kamara. But
I'm with you on that.
About Ridley, he had a good week last week. A lot of people were off of him because of the goose egg in week 1, but it was a tough first game for them as a whole team. Going into Philly, a lot of emotion, Super Bowl champs. There was the weather delay for like 3 hours. It was, whatever that was crazy. So, Calvin Ridley's definitely a good play for that price. He's kind of their number 2. I know they still have Sanu, but like he's kind of, they look more interested getting him involved than Sanu last week. So, him and Boyd, you can have some interesting, very, very cheap receivers this week that, could allow you to really raise the roof with your.
And they really don't need a lot to hit value, which is a good thing. And I agree. I mean, you have to get on them before the price goes way up. They have a blow-up game this week. Their price is going to skyrocket.
Those 2 guys will be 2 of the highest owned pickups in fantasy next week, in my opinion. Season-long fantasy.
Nice. Yeah, I like that. I've already gone out and got Ridley wherever, I'm not in dynasty leagues. Where I'm not in dynasty leagues, I've been trying to go pick up some Ridley and just on teams where I have, a bench spot available, just to, I always try and think a week or 2 ahead. Who's going to be the guy that blows up this week and number 1 on the waiver wire?
Yeah.
So,
and Matt
one
Ryan,
position we haven't talked a lot about here this morning that we'll touch on. We talked about QB, running back, and wide receiver quite a bit. Is just tight ends. I know I talked about Zach Ertz. Jordan Reed, I talked about him a little bit on the Washington side of things, getting lots of targets there. George Kittle, we haven't touched on at all. He burned people last week for sure. I think he may be a little bit lower on because, a huge percentage of the ownership this week is going to be going to Eric Ebron for sure. So I think Kittle's at more expensive. He's still not expensive. I made mid 4K on DraftKings. I think he makes a ton of sense in that. Well, that's the highest total of the week. So, if you get a guy like Kittle who's obviously shown some that he's been good with Garoppolo or can be good with Garoppolo, at the end of last year and even, week 1 and stuff like that in the highest total of the week, and you can get him around 10% or a little bit less because Ebron's going to take over and Ertz above him. He kind of fits sandwich right in the middle of their price range. I think it makes a lot of sense to go Kittle this week.
Yeah, I agree. Same reasons, I'll keep it short. Same reasons we talked about. He blew a lot of people. He burned a lot of people. Burned a lot of people last week. But that was just because of game script. They had a play for him early in the first half that he just missed a touchdown on because of a penalty. I think and then they ran the same play and they gave the touchdown to Selleck in the second half. So that stuff happens sometimes. I still think you got to trust the process. It was the right play. And I think this week it makes a lot of sense. Highest total of the week. Great guy to run it back with for a lot of reasons. He burned a lot of people. No one's going to be on him. People are going to be like, fuck that guy. He sucks. So, if he doesn't suck, he definitely not. His price did go up, but I do agree with you that he's still a little underpriced, undervalued, and we need to save every dollar we can. And one of my favorite stacks of the week is, Chiefs with running it back with people like Kittle or Pierre Garçon. Do we know if Marquise Goodwin's out yet?
I'm not sure. I'm just going to type him in here. I know he was questionable all week.
That's important.
Yeah. Still haven't seen anything yet with him.
I don't think
he has got the quad injury.
Yeah, and it's that deep bruise is deep quad bruise. That's he's a speedster. If you can't run and plant in the ground, he can't play. So
yeah.
I personally like Pierre Garçon this week. I think he could be a sneaky play. San Francisco's going to need to throw the ball a lot. They're going to be behind for sure. Even if they're not behind, they're going to need to keep up with Kansas City, so they're going to be throwing it. They're not going to be able to just set the pace and give it to Alfred Morris and Breida, I think, will be heavily involved in the passing game. But, I don't expect a week like last week. So I think a lot – Pierre Garçon, week 1, just tough matchup with your Vikings. Probably had Xavier Rhodes on him. And then, especially because Marquise Goodwin got hurt pretty early in that game. And then week 2, we just talked about it. Game script kind of didn't really favor them. They were totally in control of it. They didn't need to throw the ball. They had 10 different guys with 2 targets each. Jimmy was just throwing the ball to everybody, and he didn't need to force it. But if you had to pick one that it looked like was his favorite, Garçon probably was the guy. And I like him a lot this week. I really think he's going to be a very, very low owned option if you have a Kansas City stack to run it back with. I like Kittle too, of course, but Ebron's my guy at tight end. I love him. I think everything lines up for him. I don't care how highly owned he is. I think he's rightfully so. So instead of running 2 tight ends and putting Kittle at the flex, I chose in most of my lineups the running back value this week. So I like having, Murray, Hunt, and like Gurley, so that doesn't really leave any room for Kittle, especially because those guys are expensive and I need the savings with Ebron. So I do like Kittle a lot. I think he's a sharp guy to mention. But for me, tight ends this week, very simple. Ebron's kind of my number one for a lot of reasons, mainly just the price and the injuries and everything. It adds up. But then obviously there's going to be Kelsey's probably going to be one of the highest owned guys, just out of like chief biases and people wanting to put Mahomes stacks. And he had a great week last week. Ertz, the sharp, he'll be heavily owned amongst sharps, rightfully so. Again, I think he'll have a great week. The targets are there. He's Wentz's boy. Like everything lines up, so it'll be great. He's just very expensive. And then one guy that neither of us have mentioned that I think is interesting this week could be Evan Ingram. I think that
I like that.
Yeah, I think that Giants game is going to be a sneaky amount of points. I expect the Texans to win, even as a Giants fan. So Deshaun Watson, I think this is our first week where we see, the Watson reminiscent of last year before he got injured, where this is their first game at home. The Giants Giants defense in general isn't that amazing. Olivier Vernon's still out. So when you don't have good pass rushers, especially with a quarterback like Deshaun Watson, and you give him a lot of time, Will Fuller's there. He's stretching the field. This could be a big, high-scoring game, in which case maybe the Giants will be behind and they're getting some garbage points late on. We know the Giants' offensive line. I mean, they benched Flowers today, so maybe that'll help, but we know the Giants' offensive line doesn't give Eli much time. Ingram seems to be a guy that's pretty – 4,300 is cheaper than Kittle. And
a big, fast wide receiver, too.
Yeah, exactly. I like him a lot. I think Ingram's one of the better GPP tight end plays of the week.
Houston's given up points as well to the tight end.
It's a shame. I wish he was in more of my lineups, but it hasn't happened. So
Cool.
I guess for me, for just moving it, just to wrap it up with defenses, I'm focusing most of my attention on the Jaguars at home. I like Minnesota too if I have the extra money and it's just there. Like, of course, they're like 20-point favorites. So anytime you have a situation like that, it's good for the defense and they're going to get turnovers and sacks and, things like that. And obviously we have Murray too, so it's a good correlation play. I like the Rams a little bit too for the price. 3,100 is pretty good. They've been one of the better defenses in the NFL so far, and I do expect them to get some defensive touchdowns. They haven't really done that yet this year, and they did that a lot last year. They're crazy rowdy at home. And Phillip Rivers, when he gets under a lot of pressure, sometimes that's when he struggles, and he's not very mobile, especially the older he gets. So I could see him just chucking some balls up against the Rams and maybe getting some fumbles knocked out. So that's Cowboys D you mentioned also as well. Like they're averaging they've gotten a lot. They're getting a lot of pressure, a ton of sacks.
Second in sacks.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So 2,200, I have no problem with them at all, especially in cash.
Seattle's O-line is garbage too.
Right, exactly. So that's all I'm looking at for D. What about you? And Eagles, I guess maybe a tiny bit, like 1%.
I got a lot of Bears and Howard together.
Oh, yeah.
I got that correlation. Bears, Howard, Cowboys, Elliott, Minnesota, and Murray, and those are kind of the three that I'm concentrating on. What's that?
No Jaguar D for you?
I think that now that you mentioned that, I think that's a good pivot off Minnesota, who could be a little bit higher owned. Like you could get them at half the ownership, and Jaguars at home. I mean, that's tough to pass up. And then you mentioned Rams. Rams are I'd have to check, but I think the Rams are the only team that are top 10 against the run and the pass so far.
Yeah, they've been very, very solid. I don't expect a blowout. I don't expect like a shutout, blowout. I think the Chargers are a very talented team, especially offensively. But the Rams are something else this year. I have a feeling they're Super Bowl contenders. I really think they're Super Bowl contenders. So
for sure, they're stacked everywhere.
Part of that is winning the tough games convincingly. So if they're the team that I think they are, they'll win today by 14 points. 10 to 14 points. I think at least.
Like it.
Cool. So I guess let's take it off with you. Everyone does this, but it's called like a conviction play type thing. Do you want to say like your favorite cash and favorite GPP play type thing?
Yeah. Okay. So cash play, I'm dying on the Alex Smith Hill. I'm just gonna sit there and go with him. I just think he's got a good path to hitting value. GPP, I really like Jared Goff as my GPP quarterback. Running backs, I talked about. I like Chris Thompson, so I really like that Washington side of things for cash. GPP, I love Drake. Wide receiver, just going to flip over to that page. Wide receiver, I have a lot of Adam Thielen and Nelson Aguilar. And then for GPP, I love Amari Cooper. I think he's going to be lower owned this week. So I've got some Cooper stacks. Tight end, I have a lot of Kittle. I do have Ebron too, but I've really, especially this morning, gone to a lot of Kittle just because I think he's got a really good path to have a high floor as well as, 4 times upside as well. So that's kind of I'm looking. Punting, one guy we didn't talk about, just mention real quick, is Andrews for Baltimore. Definitely looking at him. He was amazing route runner in college with Baker Mayfield there in Oklahoma. So, yeah.
Yeah, I like it. That's a sharp call. Denver struggles against the tight end too. So,
yeah. How about you?
Yeah, that's very good. Keep it simple. QB, sure. Mahomes and Newton, fine. Mahomes and Newton are kind of my cash GPP or my cash quarterback plays. GPP, you can switch it over to Garoppolo, stay in the same game. He'll be much lower owned. People will be like a little turned off by his numbers, I think, because he's kind of been like a game manager. Week 1 was a hard matchup, and then week 2 he just did what he did to win. So I think Garoppolo will be able to keep up with Mahomes today. I like him as a GPP play, and I agree with you on Goff too. He's too cheap. He'll be up, close to 7K in some weeks, down the year. In a month or two from now, in the right matchup, I will not be surprised to see Goff as if maybe the highest, most expensive QB of the week.
Yep.
DraftKings will catch up to that. Running backs, Murray's obvious cash running back, Murray and Clement, but I don't play that much cash. I like Kareem Hunt. He's the ultimate GPP pivot for me. I guess he's not really that GPP, but I think he'll be a lot lower owned than Tyreek and Kelsey. So I think if you want some exposure to that game and don't necessarily want to stack it or completely fade it, Kareem Hunt at 6K is a good way to get exposure as well as, value in your lineup. Receivers, who did you say here? Who? Thielen?
Yeah, I mentioned Thielen and Aguilar a lot as well for cash.
I guess I'm just going to be simple. I'm going to be safe and call Cooper Kupp my cash receiver because he's so cheap.
Yeah.
My GPP guy, I like your call on Tyler Boyd a lot. I think he can easily have like 5 to 7. I expect 4 to 6 catches this week, 60 to 80 yards, maybe even 70 to 90 yards and maybe a touchdown. And you can get numbers like that from 3,700. That's crazy. So I like that a lot for GPP. Ebron, cash, tight end, Evan Ingram, and Kittle for GPP. And then obviously cash defenses, you're kind of looking at Minnesota if you can afford it. I love the Jaguars. They're personally my number one, even above Minnesota, just because of the less ownership. And then you go down to Bears, Rams, Cowboys.
Cool.
Nice. All right. That's it for me. Good job, Chris. I think we, depending on what people thought, we'll try and make this a weekly thing. So
I like it. It's good discussion Sunday morning going over, who's getting more opportunities, where the inactives are falling, and then just kind of going. We kind of went around game to game, a little bit position by position, but we covered pretty much all the plays that we talk about this week. So depending on what people comment and stuff, definitely let us know if you want us to go more on a game by game basis or a position by position, whatever helps you guys. That's why we're really doing this. So we're going to be in the RotoPro Slack chat, so make sure to get over there. And if you haven't signed up yet, go check out the 2-week free trial we got going on, and join us in the Slack chat where we're in there all the time, pretty much 24/7 myself anyway, besides when I'm sleeping, of course. But just talking about sports, we cover a ton of sports. Sundays we're there answering questions, season long, DFS, FanDuel, looking at tiers. We got everything going on, so come join us.
Brains.
Yeah, come pick our brains. Other than that, thanks for joining me this morning, Josh. And let's go make some lineups and see some green screens, everyone.
Do it, everybody. Have a great day. Enjoy your Sunday. And rotopros.com. Come join us. Bye, Chris.
Cheers.